And so first up, this morning's Irish Examiner. Could he manage Cork? Well, Billy Morgan was asked about the potential management skills of Tomás O'Shea. Everybody assumed he was talking about Kerry, but in fact he's not. He's talking about Cork. Billy Morgan and why he wants Tomás O'Shea in the red corner. They have managed on the sideline together in Sigerson Cup football. And of course, Tomás O'Shea has excelled as a player for Nemo Rangers over the last couple of seasons. That would be an interesting one. Cork in the doldrums at the moment. But could you ever envisage a day, Johnny, where a Cork man or a Cork County board invite a Kerry man in to manage the senior football team?
I think it's more likely with him than. I know he's kind of scoffed at the idea before, but you know, he's living in Cork for quite some time, strong connections with Nemo there, could definitely see it happen. He's a man with strong views on the game. Cork really are at a low ebb. Like if and when they face Tipperary in Munster, they wouldn't be. I'm not even sure they'd be favourites to be Tipperary at the moment. Yeah,
and they are due to take them on as well if Tip get past Waterford in their first. And there's a bit of an issue around that as well, which we'll get to later in the show, about scheduling and the fact that Tipperary are potentially going to have to play 2 Munster Championship matches in the space of 8 days, which kind of doesn't make much sense given how long the Championship is going to go on for. The Irish Independent, Kearns fumes over Munster fixture call. So it's been moved forward by about 8 days to basically factor in the Munster Hurling League games in the Munster Championship, and Liam Kearns thinks that's not doing much for the integrity of the Munster Senior Football Championship. Why should they have to play 2 games in a week and be looking forward to a potential Munster final or the qualifiers by the end of May, when a lot of teams haven't even taken their place in the Football Championship? The other headline is Tullow Tank O'Brien revved up for return in Leinster's Treviso clash. Everybody associated with Leinster Rugby will be desperately hoping that Sean O'Brien gets through that game in the Pro 14 with Treviso tomorrow unscathed and is fit and available for selection to take his place in the side, or at least in the matchday squad for the Champions Cup semi-final with Scarlets on Saturday week. That is a game you'll hear live and exclusive on Off the Ball with Keith Wood and Liam Toland, part of our commentary team. The Daily Mail, storm clouds gather before Ulster match. It's a very interesting piece from their chief sports writer, sorry, it's the Times Ireland, the chief sports writer, Gary Doyle, on basically what's been a really tough week for Ulster Rugby. He goes in more depth as to the last 5 years and calls for the head of Ulster Rugby to step down by the likes of Stephen Ferris, goes through the fallout from the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding rape trial, the protests that will possibly be taking place outside the Kingspan Stadium tonight from both sides. And of course, there's a lot that's happened this week with the Ulster Rugby Supporters Club. Calls for the 2 players to be reinstated. If they're not reinstated, there may be issue over future ticket sales. The provincial sponsor, Bank of Ireland, has also been vocal this week in terms of how he wants to see a very thorough and transparent review from the RFU and Ulster Rugby as well into the behaviour of the 2 players. All is not well with Ulster Rugby at the moment, and that's before we even get into the huge game they have this weekend in the Pro 14 when they take on Ospreys tonight, lose that, and they're essentially out of the running for the playoffs and possibly in a really awkward spot when it comes to playing Champions Cup rugby next season. In terms of what's happening on the pitch, Alan Quinlan will join us later in the show to go through that. The Herald Sport is our next paper this morning. Connolly no-show. I'm sure it has probably reached your ears this morning or late last night that after being named in the starting 15 for St Vincent's opening championship clash in the Dublin Senior Football Championship against Skerries Harps last night at Parnell Park, well, Dermot Connolly wasn't even in the matchday squad. Now, it certainly didn't affect Vincent's. They went on to win comfortably in that game. A couple of goals from Mossy Quinn. But Mullins tight-lipped as Vincent's star fails to line out at Parnell. Not surprisingly, Brian Mullins wasn't willing to give anything away on the situation involving Dermot Connolly. But it's an odd one, Johnny, because we had been told he was being rested by Jim Gavin. My understanding was that was the case, that Dermot Connolly wasn't being considered for Dublin at the moment while he just worked through a couple of things off the field. We did expect him to be playing club football last night, and the fact that he's not even involved in that game, it's just going to leave to the rumour mill crank into overdrive even further, and all of this speculation that doesn't do anybody any favours.
Also that he was named, you know, that's the bit I don't really get. You know, somebody told me yesterday around lunchtime that he wasn't going to be playing, but I just assumed, you know, there are clear issues with Dermot, and the longer this goes on, the more the sort of rumour mill gets going, and you hear all this sort of outlandish stuff about what's going on with him. Nobody knows. I just hope everything's okay with him. He's such a talent. I have massive sympathy for him because for a guy who's an amateur, he lives a life of a celebrity in many ways around Dublin. You know, if he went out for a pint, he finds it very hard to enjoy himself because people are plaguing him, be they supporters of him or opposition supporters who are going to rile him. Obviously, he's a tough character, but he's going through a very, very challenging time now, and it's tough for the Dublin players when they're asked to talk about it because they don't really know what to say. And I genuinely believe they don't actually know what to say. They're obviously towing the party line, but something needs...
We've no idea what's going on.
We need clarity,
here,
really.
I think you're right. Like, whatever happens, whether Diarmuid Connolly plays for Dublin again, or whether he never plays for Dublin again, or if we never see him in a Vincent's jersey again, you just want it to be okay. You just want whatever's going on off the field.
The most important thing, you know, overall is Diarmuid Connolly's well-being. Yeah. And at this stage, one can only speculate. But, you know... Wouldn't it be a great story if he did arrive back in the Championship in Dublin's hour of need, if they ever have an hour of need? But
well, they did have an hour of need last year when he arrives off the bench and kicks one gorgeous score, makes another, and it was just a microcosm of how important he is to the Dublin team.
He's probably he's the most complete forward I think I've ever seen. Left and right, it makes no difference. Some physicality, class, eye for a pass. What can you say about him, you know? And it's just going to... I'd say Jim Gavin just kind of wants this nipped in the bud now because it's a distraction for Dublin as well. They don't necessarily need him, but they need this to end, really. They need him there or not there, but not in this kind of grey area that we've had for so long.
Yeah, I think Dublin football does need Diarmuid Connolly, and maybe Diarmuid Connolly does need Dublin football, but either way, we hope that it resolves itself and that whatever is going on off the field in Diarmuid's life is resolved and that he can leave a happy and content life in the weeks and months to come.
The last thing, Dave, and Kenny will attest to this, you know, life goes by quickly. And that shelf life you have where you can play for Dublin in Croke Park in front of 82,000 people, it goes by very quickly, and Diarmuid probably needs to grasp that, you know, my time is running out a little bit as well. I'm getting on, and he needs to, you know, notwithstanding that I don't know what's going on with him, he needs to realise that this game will be over very, very quickly.
It's not like he hasn't eked out an awful lot of from his career, though, in the year that he has.
Hardly a career waste up until this point.
I
take your point.
I'd like to prolong it, though. I'd like to, because you know, it must. There's nothing like playing, you know, and you want to prolong that as long as you can. And he's good enough to play for.
But he says to me, you know, better than me. He says to me, he is that type. You know what I mean? So kind of focused and so fixated in terms of what he wants to achieve. So I'm sure that's what's actually driving him forward, like to resolve these issues if they are of a kind of personal nature or whatever they are. And I think really people just have to almost kind of one of those things, just leave it alone, not to keep digging, and just hopefully, like you say, he resolves those things and just focus again on his football. Clearly he's a huge talent.
Yeah, the last thing he needs is us sitting here speculating on the whys and the wherefores of what might be going off the pitch. The Mirror this morning, no go Salah. Klopp shrugs off Rail's interest in striker. He loves it here. There's undoubtedly going to be interest in Mo Salah.
How much is he worth? I was just saying, he's 25 years of age. He's in the top 3 in the world, arguably, at the moment.
Well, if you're talking 100 million, I don't think it matters with Harry Kane. Yeah. Surely Mo Salah is now in that same bracket, given the form.
But he's probably worth about 200 million, you think, in today's...
They're not going to be cashing in the near future. That's an absolute certainty.
Well, they certainly don't need to, you would think, now that they've
got
the Coutinho money and they're certainly going forward with that front three. I would imagine Mo Salah, but he strikes from his own personal point of view, looks as settled as he ever has been in his career. He has found his place.
Yeah, he looks content and looks like the lad who's would be ambitious. Of course he is, but he looks as if already he's really bonded with that football club. The relationship between him and the supporters and the manager,
that's a big deal as well,
teammate.
Isn't it? You know?
Well, it's a factor where it has to be when you want to keep these players. Ultimately, these players of that nature, of the quality that he is, if they want to go, they go, regardless of the length of the contract. You know, if he wants out, if he's not happy, you got to get rid of him. You can stamp your feet, you can threaten this and that, but ultimately you got to show him the door.
Can't see that happening.
They're almost a force of nature, but that's what I'm saying. I look at him and I think, well, no, Liverpool have been good to him so far. I think they'll look after him again. I'm sure there'll be a contract extension on the table, if not this summer, certainly at the end of next year, even though they probably don't have to do that. So I think the club will endeavour to look after him, and he just looks to be settled and enjoying his football and at the right place.
And he's never played in an offensive system that is just so enriching for him as a player. You know, it's just
not in Italy.
Not in Italy, but not for Chelsea either. You know, it must be just so enjoyable what he's just playing with Firmino essentially, and obviously Manny, but particularly Firmino.
Yeah, and the ethos of the manager as well, how he likes to play his football, his direct style of football, is get it back to front quickly, get in behind, this kind of high energy, dynamic football. That's the type of player he is. Doesn't want to overcomplicate the game, doesn't want to come, drop into the pockets, have too many touches on the ball. He wants to get in behind you, he wants to get into the space and hurt you, score and create goals, and that's the type of player he is. I think that suits Klopp's philosophy in terms of how he wants to play, not overly complicate the game, get the ball back to front quickly, plenty of energy around the pitch and a real clinical edge to your football high up the pitch, and he kind of epitomises
He's just seriously quick with everything he does. He just does it very quickly. There's no delay.
We'll get into it a little bit more. The one thing I have noticed with him this season, yes, he was scoring a lot of goals.
Hair, you got to notice the hair.
If you had a Kenny, what a player you could have been.
Hair, exactly. Obviously, someone follically challenged like myself, I could appreciate good hair, absolutely.
Johnny's this morning.
Johnny's doing all that. He's a bit of style. He's got a little bit of. I'm not a big fan of people who spend too much time on the hair. And I'm going to roll back. Now, Salah strikes me a bit like myself. He bounces out of bed in the morning, whoosh.
Doesn't need to do much.
Oh, he's gone. Whereas yourself, I'd imagine, spend a little bit more time in front of the bathroom mirror.
Half a minute or so,
Half a minute, really.
It looks to me like Johnny didn't make much of an effort this morning.
Bit of product in there as well. A bit of product in there as well. Look, yeah.
I'm not gonna name it, but yeah.
You got to make the best of what you got, Johnny. I don't blame you for that.
The back of the Irish Daily Mail this morning. This is going to go on till well after 9 o'clock with these two clowns to my left, so there's plenty to look forward to. Back to the Irish Daily Mail this morning. The main story is don't kill Kane. Pochettino comes to Starman's defence. Interesting backlash against Harry Kane's claim that he got the goal last weekend. It was a game I was at, that free kick from Christian Eriksen. Kane insisted, flicked him on the shoulder on the way through, and look, as all good strikers do, you claim the goal. I don't see why anybody should have a major issue with it. I wouldn't imagine Harry Kane would claim a goal that wasn't his. I don't think he is that kind of a fella.
Saying Harry, God forbid.
I just don't think you'd bother. Why bother?
He might have thought he got a touch. Doesn't actually mean he did get a touch. Have you seen it? I haven't seen it.
To me,
did you say that?
There's no difference in him thinking he got a touch and actually having got a touch.
Well, there is to the fact whether he should actually awarded the goal. There is a difference because he physically didn't get a touch. He should.
But in his own mind, if he feels he got a touch.
Is it just the philosophy of a goal scorer?
Goals, clearly.
I think so, yeah.
It's just a goal scorer's mindset, which is fair enough. You have to have this. As a player, he's you can't knock him at all. His attitude, everything he does. So I'm willing to forgive him.
Forgive him for what?
For if exactly. Actually,
you get this.
Exactly.
You get this in the dressing room. The lads, my goal is your goal, a little bit of crack, and that's all good. But for that to actually come out in the public domain and this be kind of played out, I find it a little bit cringe, to be honest. I have a huge amount of respect.
I brought this up to you before. How many goals did you get in your career? None.
Where's the relevance? Where's the relevance of this? I mean, this is coming out left field
entire career.
Dave, help me out here.
How many goals?
Relevance
there was no link there. There was no reason.
0 or 1. Which was it?
If you were a centre forward yourself.
You're wrong. Do your homework. It wasn't 0 or 1. So there you go. Straight back at you.
The relevance is if you were a striker yourself, you might be coming to this conversation from a completely different view.
Days coming. I'm getting tag teamed here between
the other story in the Irish Daily Mail this morning has been written by Hugh Farrelly, and you can see the tag on the top. The only way Irish rugby can move on is to move these players on. Obviously referring to Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding. It is a thought-provoking piece from Hugh Farrelly, basically saying that the review from the IRFU and Ulster Rugby has put them in a position where they should find the players in breach of their contracts and that they have brought the game into disrepute, and that the only way to avoid more controversy, more focus, demonstrations, protests is for Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding to actually move on from Irish rugby. Whether or not you agree with that is something you probably have to ask yourself, but do get in touch with us. Let us know what you think. It's certainly something that may well come to a head in and around the Kingspan Stadium tonight, because there are 1 or 2 protests planned ahead of the Ulster rugby match with Ospreys. It's a crucial Pro 14 game, as we've already mentioned, but there are people on both sides. It's been a tumultuous week up in Ulster, and when the results of that IRFU and Ulster Rugby review come out, whichever way it comes down, whichever side it comes down on, there's probably going to be further inquiries and protests and fallout from it. So that story is going to run and run, unfortunately. That's the papers from my end. Johnny Ward, what have you got for us?
I guess I'll start with the Sun. Now the Sun has obviously Diarmuid Connolly. Where is Diarmuid? But it has a lovely piece about Harry Redknapp's trip to meet the London footballers ahead of their clash against Sligo, where basically they have a big photo of Harry and the squad, and obviously poor old Harry Kane gets moan goal. I think it's a little bit harsh, isn't it?
No, I think it fits. The cap fits.
There you go. Central defender's cap on again.
The Star has more Harry Kane. It also has Brendan Rodgers in the trap roar telling Celtic to relax. And we have obviously Klopp on Salah. But they've excellent League of Ireland coverage, and they've Pat Dolan talking about the new proposed stadium. And Garrett Kelleher's picture there. And Pat Dolan says, my only issue is I'd have a 20,000 seater stadium, not 12, which is very Pat Dolan-esque. But they also have he also talks about Watford and the great work they're doing there. But in fairness to Pat, I do remember about when they played Celtic in '98. Shortly after that, he was proposing this move to St Michael's and a big new stadium. And Pat was always ambitious, and he was ambitious enough to know that the League of Ireland could be a lot better than it was. And maybe he's been a bit avaricious here, but
I think it's a really exciting project. I don't know the detail of it. I just read a little bit yesterday as well. I was in the city, but even just talking about a 12,000 all-seater stadium, I mean, that's the kind of talk that we've been looking for. Like, you know what I mean? Somebody looking at the bigger picture. And
you need to look at the bigger picture. Yeah. You can't say just, okay, Pats get like 1,500 average support, so let's build a 2,000-seater stadium. There's a massive catchment area there, and this ground should transcend St Patrick's Athletic. Should be available for European games, for other clubs, even for other sports, you know, potentially. But obviously we'll talk about that later. The Times has an interesting piece with the Irishman helping to light the MLS flame in Atlanta. These two guys basically heavily involved in the MLS over there, and Ronaldo, who obviously works out in the gym more than Kenny and I. Feature there. And finally, the Racing Post has Johnny Ward's.
I'm pretty disciplined.
Johnny Ward's selections for the night, which includes a bet on Shamrock Rovers live on Air Sport to beat Bows.
Okay.
A lot of people.
What can you get Rovers at tonight?
4-7. A lot of people accuse me of being very anti-Shamrock Rovers, but I'm actually not. I just think that they're a club they're a very big club, and they should be maybe achieving more than they have. Although I expect in the future they'll become the predominant club in the League of Ireland.
At 7-4 on.
Yeah, not a great bet.
But it's a Johnny Ward bet. I'm not sure.
I have some other selections as well in the other games. So pick up the Racing Post, and obviously we should mention as well, Monday the 13th, the day before the Grand National, with loads of coverage of the second day, and we had a great first day of entry. My bite was unbelievable, and day 2 today. We'll have some selections later in the show.
You've got a long day ahead.
I do have a long day ahead, yeah, culminating in watching a bit of Bows and Rovers later on.
There you go.
And a good sleep, because this early rising is tough going. I'm telling you.
Straight back to bed for you after the show this